It is time for our first Nanos on the numbers for 2017. There's good news for the Liberals to start the year off, but it might not last. Let's head to Ottawa, where CTV's Don Martin gets the numbers from pollster Nick Nanos. Don?
It's time for another segment of Nanos on the numbers to start 2017. New year, not a lot of change in the numbers. Let's talk about the Trudeau Preference Index. He's still doing pretty well.
Yes, you know, you can see when you look at the numbers, we ask Canadians who they prefer as Prime Minister. He comes out on top at 49%. He's about 30 points ahead of Rona Ambrose. However, the good news is that Rona Ambrose, compared to a year ago, is doing much better. She's up 6 points. It probably speaks to kind of her service in the House of Commons and kind of hammering away at the Liberals and keeping the Conservative troops together and rallied against the Liberals. So positive news for Rona Ambrose, looking at the long-term trend.
She'll probably get peaked just as she leaves the job.
Yeah, go figure, right?
Yeah.
You know.
But you know, you and I have talked about this in 2016. And you kept saying, you know, these numbers remain artificial until a full-timer, a real leader replaces them. Not a real leader, but one that's, you know, designated to fight in the next election. Is there any sign that this is starting to factor in at all, or it doesn't look like
I think it speaks to the fact that people have been focusing a little more on the Conservatives over the past year. And, you know, right now, you know, even Mulcair's numbers are a little down, even factoring the margin of error. But, you know, once we have permanent leaders, the technical correction, the political correction will take place probably on this measure.
But you know, Trudeau's going down a little bit, but his party's doing even better than ever.
Exactly. You know, when we look at the latest ballot numbers, we have the Liberals at 43%, the Conservatives at 28%, the NDP at 17%, and what we can see is that the Liberals are doing even stronger than they did in the last federal election. The Conservatives without a leader are doing a little worse. You know, the interesting thing about the trend, actually, two interesting things about the trend. First of all, British Columbia. The Liberals have been hammered in British Columbia over the last month, probably the cocktail of pipelines and carbon tax.
Right.
They went from leading in British Columbia to now a three-way tie between the Liberals, New Democrats, and the Conservatives. And the Liberals are starting to slip in among Canadians between the ages of 40 to 49.
Whoa.
A key demographic, right?
Yeah.
People who are employed, people who have
too.
parents, kids, people who are, you know, paying taxes. So I'm going to be watching that because that's not great news for the Liberals.
Does that ever spill over into the provincial scene? Because she's got an election coming up this year, Christy Clark, the Premier. Is there any connection or correlation, or doesn't that work that way?
Well, it doesn't necessarily work on the Liberal front because, as we know, a Liberal in British Columbia is very different than a Liberal in Ottawa, even though they're both Liberals.
Yeah.
The BC Liberals are a little more of the right.
Okay.
How's that?
All right. Well, I won't. I was going to say, give me a prediction for next year this time, what we'll be looking at, but that might be unfair.
Well, the Liberals, I think, will probably be in the 30s,
Oh.
right, as they start to govern, and as the Conservatives and the NDP get organized. I can't see them past over 40. Maybe this is another bet. Oh,
Would you eat your hat if they're over 40?
What, a year from now?
Yeah.
Maybe. How's that?
That's not a bet. All right. An issue that's had some taxpayers furrowing their brows was the high cost of renovating 24 Sussex. You decided to pull, I thought, what was it? I can't remember what the number was. There was a huge cost associated with over $100 million to fix up the old 24 Sussex.
38.
Was it 38 million?
Yes, that's what I was told.
38. Might be a 38. Okay. A lot of money anyway. Public doesn't seem to want it fixed up.
No,
They think
exactly.
this is a tear down or not a fixer up.
And we talked about the good news and that the Liberals are still quite strong, and Justin Trudeau is still quite popular. Potential turbulence items. First of all, the renovation at 24 Sussex. A majority of Canadians would prefer just to tear down 24 Sussex and rebuild if it gets really expensive. And, you know, I think whenever people hear renovation, it's kind of like those bad reality shows. They figure that it's going to go badly, and also that it's going to be more expensive than promised. And I think this could be a potential risk for the Liberals. The sad part, or the tragic part, if you're Justin Trudeau, is, you know, he's got to pay the bill because a number of other prime ministers, probably going as far back as Paul Martin, didn't renovate and maintain 24 Sussex as they should have.
Exactly. Now, trade has got a lot of people a little antsy because Donald Trump's talking walls with Mexico and better deals for America, and you know, the Ford plant in Mexico, they've scrapped that plant and moved it back to Michigan. So there's a lot of concerns that our auto sector is going to be hit. Likelihood of getting a better trade deal with the U.S. public, you asked the public that question?
Yes.
What did they tell you, Nick?
They tell you that they are very unlikely to think that we will get a better deal if we start renegotiating NAFTA. And I think Donald Trump has talked tough. And, you know, the U.S., we've benefited from a great relationship with the United States in terms of the trade deals that we have. But now Donald Trump is talking about putting American jobs first. That means Canadian jobs number 2.
Last. All right. Nick Nanos, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Back to you in Toronto.